Hi everyone, welcome back to the Wonder of Anime podcast. I'm your host, Lisa, a multimedia anime content creator, and my work spans across my blog, my YouTube channel, and of course, this podcast. And I am so honored to be joined today by one of my favorite people ever, which I already talked about like twice, and we've only had 2 episodes this season, so that says a lot. But I'm joined by Kiy, one of my besties. So if you follow me on social media, if you've been listening to the podcast, you're already familiar with her. But if you're not, let me tell you a little bit about Kiy. Dismantling stereotypes one pink pixel at a time, Kiy is a PhD student delving into the realms of social belongingness and self-efficacy in STEM. Her studies emphasize the pivotal roles that representation and role models play in attracting and maintaining the presence of women in STEM fields. She holds a keen interest in the gaming world, exploring not just its technological facets, but also how women navigate the space both online and within the industry's corridors. When not immersed in her research, Kiy is spending time cultivating a safe and vibrant online community of 50,000, known affectionately as the Pretty Committee, playing games created by, for, and spotlighting women, modeling authenticity as an act of resistance by sharing her experiences as an ultra-feminine Black woman in STEM and academia. Well, Kiy, I feel like I know your bio like by heart, but I will say that I was expecting to be like Kiy with an I, not an E, because that's how I say your name. But I'm so happy to have you here. And I told the story a little bit on my episode with Ari about how you and her were really instrumental in developing this new format of my podcast. Because if you guys follow us on social media, Kiy is like the definition of someone who posts about what she loves, only talks about what she loves. It's very rare that you go into any space that she creates that she's saying anything negative. Like, I think you'd have to search and try really hard because that's just how the person that she is, and she spreads a lot of light, love, and possibility, and like pours that love into her interests. As you can see with her bio and the work that she's done, she's managed to, it's rare that people like really cultivate who they are and use that in every facet of their life. Like, sometimes I feel like people is like, my career's here, my creative venture's here, this is who I am as a person, and you have this marriage of everything together that I admire, and I talk to you all the time. I'm like, oh my god, Kiy, I love you. so that's just something that is that I love about you, and that's kind of, in our conversations, the rebrand of the show was based a lot on talking about what we love and uplifting anime, as opposed to doing like hot takes or just your boring standard interviews. Right. But enough about that. I wanted to highlight that because, of course, we give flowers here and credit where it's due, and this wouldn't be possible without you. But for those who may be getting to know you for the first time, if you can tell us a little bit about your journey into creating the content that you do now, because it is a little bit different, I think, than when we first had you on. Not that you don't do that stuff anymore, but it really has transformed since then.
Yeah, so if you're a new listener, what Lisa's referring to is an interview we did probably 2 years ago at this point. And at that time, I was earlier on in my academic journey in getting my PhD. And I came into the program expecting to focus on the representation of women in STEM in media. And the media forms I was focused on at the time were anime, comic books, video games, and manga. And what I found in my research was that yes, representation in media matters, but a lot of times once young women are hooked into STEM and then they get into the actual industry, a lot of times they leave because they don't feel like they belong. They feel very isolated. Obviously, as a whole, women are underrepresented in STEM. And so I wanted to focus more on, yes, like that representation piece, but also like the role model aspect and how like those connections matter. And then I wanted to like focus in a little bit more on like a specific umbrella of STEM, specifically technology, since that's a program I'm in. I'm in an engineering and technology program. And so I wanted to cut out like some of the other things such as anime, manga, and comic books, just to make it easier. To put it like very plainly, in terms of getting IRB approval for research studies and that sort of thing, focusing on like technology and like computer science is like a yes. So being able to like still keep the video game aspect, still keep representation in, but also think about role models and mentoring and how that really matters as well, was a way to kind of like niche down in a sense. So
And
with that, I'll say that my content, obviously because of my dissertation focus is a bit more zoomed in, I've decided to highlight a lot of like my gaming. And so when I do stream, I stream games made by, for, or featuring like really, really fly female characters. And then overall, I think the through line through all of my content throughout all the years I've been online is authenticity and just being like really girly and really glam in all the spaces that I occupy, including STEM, including academia, gaming, etc.
of course, I'm always in awe of you. But like having known before what you were doing and now, this more niche down version of your research that you're doing, I think it just, me, I believe everything in alignment. So I just think that it's such a perfect like journey of your topic and getting down to it. Cause I do, like, obviously I love anime. That's why we're here. But video games especially just there's so much more information. It's so like now, even just 2-3 years ago, video games is like men, esports,
Yep.
Call of Duty, and now it's becoming a lot more visible. We see a lot of products geared towards women, and it's not just becoming something like I always think it's funny when we talk about video games with men. It's like this undesirable oh, don't date a man that plays video games, and it's like, wait, but I'm playing video games too. Like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? It's been a good transformation to see.
Thank you. It's been really fulfilling. It's just been really fulfilling just because of the fact that I feel like gaming is a lot more mainstream and acceptable, that more so than it was in like prior years. And so I feel like I'm like in the right place at the right time. A lot of my research, like I said, it's already niche, but it's kind of like one of one. And so it's exciting to be innovative in that way and really just be able to study the things I'm passionate about. So like I'll be speaking in March on one of my research papers, which is on gaming while glam. So literally just analyzing how like attractive women or like aesthetic, gamer women experience online spaces and how a lot of times they're like dismissed just because they're attractive or, have an aesthetic setup. And so like exploring their experiences, which is research that like hasn't been done. Sure, obviously like there's research around women in general and their experience in gaming, but to really niche down to like women who are like me has been really fun.
So I did, before we get into the main topic, because you have been doing this research and you are going to be presenting this in March, is there like a fun fact or something that you learned that you can share that kind of surprised you or affirmed something that you believed while you've been doing this?
I think like the biggest surprise is I posted on TikTok like a call for women to participate in the study, and the fact that like my experience as like a girly glam pink aesthetic gamer is mirrored in other women's experience means like it's just not a me thing or just like a hunch that I have. What I'm hoping as I continue with the research and interviewing the women that my hypothesis is right, right? And that's what we hope for. Obviously, you can't force it in a study, and if it turns out wrong, I'll hold that L and, we'll explain it. But just the fact that there are so many women who, like, literally this is their experience.
And it's sad that it's their experience, but I think it's important to highlight that because, and I really urge listeners, especially if they haven't, to check out your TikTok, especially because you have a lot of videos about, like, being you in the workplace and things like that. And it's crazy how if like being into pink and glam and the things that you are so like controversial or looked down upon, like it's not taken as serious, and it's like they want you to look good and present yourself well, but if you kind of go over it a little bit and you look really good for yourself and doing the things that you like, then it's like, whoa, hold down there, slow down, you're doing too much.
Yep.
So I'm very, like I said, and I ask you questions about this all the time in our personal lives. It is something that I'm very interested in, and I'm glad that it's something that you love, so it makes it fun for you to research. But I'm excited to see where all this goes. So I'm so excited. And now, as you guys know, this is the second part where Kiy's really going to school. She's getting her PhD today. And her favorite anime. I don't know. I'm the committee. I don't think that's who assigns PhDs. I don't know. You're defending it to is it defending body?
I defend my decision to the committee. You got it.
Yes, I've been doing some research. And we're going to talk about your favorite anime, which is Fire Force. And before I get started and having you teach us, I want to give my journey on Fire Force because it is an anime that I've watched, and how I'm trying to think, because I was trying to remember a couple days ago, like, how did I get into Fire Force? And I think Fire Force, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you're the expert, was airing at the same time that Demon Slayer was, that first season. I didn't watch either of them the season they came out. But then I remember Oscar, who's my husband, saw Demon Slayer. He was like, you gotta watch Demon Slayer, you gotta watch Demon Slayer. So I watched Demon Slayer. I was like, oh my god, this is crazy, this is so good. And he was like, there's another one that you should watch, which is Fire Force. So I started Fire Force immediately after. And this was back when I was like doing like my live tweet thread. So I have like a whole thread on Twitter about me watching Fire Force. And I actually really enjoyed it. I am a sucker for, there's certain key elements in Fire Force that, like, somebody that nobody else likes, they bully him because of his appearance. Like, you kind of got those elements. I'm sold. And I saw the whole first season maybe like a week or two. Like, I really binged it, which is rare for me now in this age. And then I started the second season, but I know I didn't finish the second season. I am interested in finishing the second season, but I'm like, are they going to announce that third season? Like, let me know before I continue. But Fire Force is definitely one that I was like, this is amazing. I love it. Where's the rest? But that's my journey with Fire Force. So as you're going to get into your journey, but what is Fire? For people who are like, what are they talking about? What is Fire Force?
Yeah, okay. So Fire Force was a manga that was written and illustrated by Asashi Okubo, who is the creator of Soul Eater as well, which is one of my favorites. And it was serialized in the weekly Shonen magazine, September 2015 through February 2022. So it's a wrap series. We have 34 volumes. You may be able to see behind me, they've started doing like the omnibus editions. So we're up to 7. 8 comes out in February. I've been collecting them and kind of documenting that. Hopefully we get a box set. But yeah, it's a completed manga series. We currently have 2 seasons of the anime. The anime was adapted in 2019, I believe, July 2019. And so we got season 1, and then the following year we got season 2. It's produced by David Productions, and they're the ones behind Cells at Work, JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. And yeah, hopefully we will get season 3 soon. I believe that's in the works. But yeah, that's like a little background about Fire Force. I can go more into like the synopsis if you would like me to at this time, but yeah.
Yes. So what is Fire Force about?
All right, okay. So to get to like the current premise, I need to like set the scene, right? So where the show starts, I need to go back 250 years prior to that. And there was this huge event called the Great Cataclysm. And essentially, like, it wiped just about everything out. Basically, the world was set on fire. And with that, many nations were wiped out. There were very few habitable areas. And it was just a big mess. And so a lot of the survivors took refuge in Tokyo. They call it the Tokyo Empire. And with that, there was an emperor named Raffles the First. And we hear about him a lot throughout the show when you're watching the show or you're reading the manga. And essentially, he establishes like this religion, this faith of the Holy Soul Temple, soul meaning like sun, right? With that, there's also this corporation known as Haijima Industries, and they developed this power source essentially called Amaterasu, and that's basically what's powering the entire country. So that's like the setting, right? That's what leads us to the present. So in present day, where the series picks up, we have this thing known as spontaneous human combustion, wherein at any given moment, like, humans can just like set a blaze on fire. They're almost like fiery zombies, right? And so because of this, we have what is known as the Fire Force. They're special Fire Force companies, and these are members whose job it is basically to combat the infernals. That's the name of the people who set on fire. And then uncovering like the mysteries behind spontaneous human combustion. So like that's like the premise of Fire Force.
It's so funny because I've seen Fire Force and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that this is what was happening. And it's funny because Like, you just, I remember too when I first watched it, I was like, where is this go? Because, like, for those who may are not familiar with the anime, they wearing like almost firefighter-esque uniform. Oh, look at you! See, she got her company outfit on, ready to go. And so you're like, how does this play into it? And even just hearing that premise, like, it already is so layered, like, with the religious aspect, and then you have, like, it being, like, a power source, and, like, because, you know, the minute, like, there's, like, some government or militarization, and they're trying to use something, that's always going to go awry there. But I feel like it's so layered, and something that I felt personally, I don't know how you felt, like, the first time that you watched it, is, like, I felt like every episode, I was like, I know exactly what's happening. And then I'll be like, I did not know what was happening. Yeah, like, you feel like you're putting together the pieces. Meanwhile, it's a whole different puzzle. You got the wrong pieces. And that's what I felt that entire first season. Like, every time I thought I figured it out, they were like, psych, you think about something else. It's not what's happening.
Yep.
So how did you discover Fire Force? Were you watching it? Did you discover it like when it was airing?
Yeah, so funny story. When the manga was being serialized, I'm someone who typically, you know this about me. You know, I've been like a lifelong manga reader. When I was a kid, I used to like rent them from the library. But I try to keep up with them like online as they're being released. But at that time, so we're in 2015, 2016-ish, I was teaching. And at the time, I was also getting my master's degree. And so, like, I would start reading certain manga and I'm like, oh, this is good, but there's no way I can keep up with it weekly. I'm going to forget. So I would, like, let it build up. Fire Force was one of those where I started to read and I was like, I'm just going to let it build up and I'll catch up when I catch up. And I forgot. I completely forgot. So we fast forward to so I had read some of the manga and was definitely intrigued and knew this was something I wanted to return to, especially when we started to get like printed copies. I just needed that to happen and it hadn't happened yet. So fast forward to 2019. At this time, I'm out of the classroom. I have my master's degree and I am in teacher preparation. So like I'm teaching teachers. And because of that, I used to live in Atlanta during the summer. So I was away from home. And I traveled a lot for work. And so Bossman is my partner for those listening and watching. You know, we would do our evening FaceTime calls. And at the end of the night, like, I'm exhausted. I've been up since 5 a.m. Like, it was just a whole lot. So he, you know, was telling me about this anime he was watching. He didn't say the name or anything. He just mentioned it in passing. He was like, oh my gosh, babe, there's this anime. You're going to love it. There's this character you're going to love. Like, she's literally you. And then he was like, and their eyes are so cool. And I was like, okay, well, stop watching it, and we can watch it together when I get back home. So when I returned home that summer, because like I said, it started airing in July, he put it on while he was cooking, and he had put it on where he left off, so it wasn't from the very beginning. So at this point, this is like episode 5 where he's at, and I see Princess Hibana on the screen, and I'm like, oh, that's literally me. But then I'm like, wait, this looks a little familiar. And then I'm reminded, like, oh, this was the manga I was reading years ago. So yeah, that's how I discovered Fire Force.
That's so, I love, like, I mean, I didn't know you back then, but looking back, it was like a premonition that I would have known, because especially like her character, and I mean, anyone who's listening, there might be spoilers here. I feel like initially it looks like she's gonna be a villain. Mm-hmm. So like, and again, that's one of those things Fire Force does, where it sets you up and you think like you know at the end of the day you're like, who are these people? Because I thought you were someone. And immediately I was like, oh, I love her. Like it was so hard. I mean, I love all the other people too, but her, I was like, oh, I'm sold. Like, especially when there's this part, I specifically remember, because this was back when Crunchyroll would let you screenshot the video player, where she's like walking on top of people.
Yeah,
on
like, her crew.
I'm like, you're a freaking vibe. Like, yes, this isn't me, but this is who I would imagine in my head. I have the potential. I didn't get there. But I love that he immediately identified that it was you. And like now I feel like I call you Kibana all the time because I'm like, that's who you are. But with that being said, so you see, you guys are watching it, you identified the character, fall in love with her. When did you like know like this was your favorite anime? Like when did it make that distinction for you that you're like, oh, there's not a top of this. Like this is my number one.
I knew it was top five immediately as watching it because there had never been a moment watching any media where I felt like I identified as a character more. And with Hibana in particular, to your point about her, seeming like the bad guy or having like this air about her, that's typically how people view me. Like I'm definitely like the big bad villain in many people's stories. But for those who know me, that's not necessarily the case. Like it's just like a rough exterior. There's some backstory there, but really just a good person. I love that she is brilliant. Like the things that she figures out in the series is literally what pushes the story forward, right? It's because of her figuring things out. And I love that, especially to have a character of color. I mean, people debate back and forth whether, whatever. I won't get into that. But having a character of color, like clearly who visibly has like some melanin to their skin, just be so brilliant and just such a boss. Like I had never experienced that. So in that moment, I knew this was going to be one of my favorite anime. Like just off the strength of Hibana alone, even if the entire anime ended up being garbage, I would still ride for it just because of her. So I knew it was going to be like top 10, top 5. I actually think I have a tweet in like 2021 where like it clicked for me, like this is my number one. And my number one at the time was Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. And literally it was Fire Force that dethroned it for me. And for me at this time, so we're talking 2021, we now have 2 seasons of the anime, and we're almost done with the manga. The manga was completed the following February in 2022. So we're a couple months shy of the completion of the manga. I'm reading it, I'm keeping up with it, and I've already rewatched, the first 2 seasons. I can't even tell you how many times. I rewatch Fire Force all the time. Like, I was just watching it last night. So at that time, like, I've sat with the anime. I'm very pleased with the manga and where it's going. And it just clicked for me. I'm like, this is my number one. Because as much as I love Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, I literally do not return to it in the way that I do with Fire Force.
They be getting you like that. Like, it's when you're just like, I'm thinking about you. And I love that it wasn't, a lot of times, a lot of people's favorite anime is something that's done. It's something that's completed. And the fact that it's like not even done and you're like, no, this is it. Like that just shows the power of the show and the power of the storytelling with it. And I mean, I love love and I love stuff like that. But I think it's rare, at least for me, like it's been rare for me. Like I haven't had a series where maybe like JJK, because I think that's still ongoing, but it's been rare that I've been into something like Demon Slayer was already like ended a little bit right after the first season came out, so it's like hard to catch things while they're still like and getting their flowers while they're still going, if it's not like like a huge like My Hero Academia or something, like something that's like super long, but it's just the power of. And I'm not as deep into, what happens. I haven't read the manga or anything, but just seeing how much you love it and how it's your favorite. And Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is my favorite anime specifically, because I have like a different favorite manga. But like knowing that it dethroned that, like I'm like, I trust that, because I too love Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, but that is something that like every month I have a certain scene that I go back to. I go on Crunchyroll and it's already at that part because I rewatch it all the time. and to your point about rewatching Fire, like you did tweet something and I was like, she watching Fire Force again? Like it just be random. You just be like this random Fire Force. Since you rewatch it like all the time, are you rewatching it from the beginning or do you have certain episodes that you go and rewatch?
Literally both. My rewatch that I started like 2 weeks ago was from the beginning, but then like I'll skip around. I've also been rewatching with intention. I'm gonna be like a deranged lunatic right now. Okay, listen.
I'm ready.
I have like this Fire Force notebook, okay? And because this is my favorite anime, there's always like gems that I'm picking up, and like I just always have so many like racing thoughts in my mind when I'm watching, and so I just like jot them down in this notebook. But right now, what I'm studying is screen time for a specific character, and we can get into that later. So I've been watching like with intent specifically around that character and their episodes, but it's like a little bit of everything. I always restart it from the beginning. I jump around to specific episodes. It's just whatever mood I'm in.
I love that. And I can't, we're going to get into the next part of that. But before we do, when you think about Fire Force, and you know, it is relatively new. Like, it's not like an older anime. I mean, it's almost 10 years old at this point. But it is something that the people who know, they know. The Fire Force fandom, like, they be fandoming. Like, they go hard for, as one should in their fandom. And there's something about it, like, you know, you're not the only person I know that like rewatches it or is like constantly like talking about it and stuff. And what is something for you that makes it that in all these years of you watching it, you watch it all the time? What quality is it for you that makes it timeless, that you're able to either pick it up randomly or start it from the beginning?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I think one personally is just like my connection to the story and like the types of genre I'm into. So like for me, this is like a dark fantasy, like a science fantasy type of situation. So for me, I'm always going to go back because there's always going to be something new. And this is again gonna make me seem a little woo woo and off my rocker. But what is that history show where it's like aliens and something like, were they aliens? But there's a show on the History Channel basically.
And the guy's like, aliens. Like, that's that meme? Is that the one?
Yeah. Okay, so I watch stuff like that all the time. I'm just someone who's like a lifelong learner. And so even if things sound crazy or like not true, like I like listening to everyone's experiences and just like making meaning myself and coming to a conclusion myself. And so I say that to say there are certain things I watch or read about like religion or mythology where I'm like, oh my gosh, I was in Fire Force, and like I can connect the dots, right? So for me personally, that makes it timeless because there's always something new. Like as you learn as an individual, like throughout life, and you're learning about these new religions and technologies and, you know, mythology and all those things, like if you're rewatching Fire Force, like it'll connect things that you might have missed before because you just didn't have the knowledge. I think in general, what makes this anime timeless is setting. Just follow me for a second. When I think about anime like Cowboy Bebop, where we have the 90s, right? But it doesn't quite seem like it takes place in the 90s because it's futuristic. For me, Fire Force is one of those anime where like you can't quite date it in the way that you, like if you're watching My Hero Academia, I feel like you'd be able to like date it like this time. And for Fire Force, it's not the same. So I feel like for like years down the line, people can return to this and it's going to feel like fresh and new, and you can't like associate it with a certain time. So yeah, I think setting is like a big thing in terms of just like general, like outside of myself as an individual.
It's when you the thing about the setting, now that you say that, I'm like, absolutely, because I'm trying to think like even like the scenes, I don't know, you're gonna have to forgive me because I'm not the expert, so I don't remember people's names. But this is my man. He don't know he my man. The guy with the red hair, and I think he was like at this shop and
Vulcan?
like,
The engineer?
Yes, him. He's so hot. Like when they're like at his shop, like you can't place things. Like it's not like it seems like it's from a certain era, and that I actually didn't notice that. And now that you say that, I'm like, maybe it's time for me to do a rewatch because I'm. Like, it is true, like, with certain shows, like, you'll still have a cell phone, or they'll have certain technology, like, even if they never say the year. Like, you can tell by the influences in the story, generally. Like, it takes place in the millennium, it takes place in the 80s. But, wow, I never thought about that before. That, I do like that. And then, too, with, like, the technology that they have with the fire stuff. I sound like somebody that's trying to keep up with like on a date and they try to impress the date but they don't know what they talk about.
No, you don't.
The one technology stuff, but I am remembering. I'm like, But it is, it's funny because when I think of one of my favorite parts, this is so unrelated, but it is kind of related, is you were talking about how like they're the fire companies and stuff and like the image of the fire companies in the community. And the mascots
Yeah.
Those are my favorite thing about Fire Force, and I always think about them. And they were so cute when I first saw them. But the other point that like you said it and it just went in my head was about the fact that like you'll be watching other things and you'll be like, oh, this, you know, this was in Fire Force and this clicked here. And something that I feel like I love when that happens, and I specifically with Fire Force, I'm not like, you know, I'm not into like watching, I mean, I don't really watch other stuff, but there have been like, I've seen things that you've talked about or threads that you have where you've aligned things, and it makes me think of sometimes too, like a lot of times with foreign media, especially like anime, it will be specifically like Japanese lore or something like that, where, you know, it'll go over the regular person's head and it's not something that they think about. But the fact that a show like this is combining a whole lot of things, and like science is universal, like it isn't just one country or anything like that. And the fact that you're able to like watching something on the History Channel and have a reference, like just shows you how much love and care and like thought went into this show that people might not even recognize, because they either don't, a lot of people don't seek other media, and or you know, they don't have like these other interests, but also it's just like they don't give things, I feel like, enough credit. Like I think people just see Fire Force and they're like boobs and fire, and it's like whoa, wait a minute, this is so much more than what you think it is.
Yep, you're right.
Like I've seen you had threads about the fire, and I was like, now wait a minute, this is like, it's like totally went, even me, like totally went over my head. And I think of myself as someone who pays a little bit more attention, but it's just like the world building. And I will say this, because you had mentioned that you had watched Soul Eater, like you're familiar with Soul. I never saw Soul Eater or anything before, so Fire Force was my first introduction to this mangaka in general and like anything of their work. So I know, like, you know, if this is a style for them, I never knew that. So I was like, this is crazy how much like layering and information is in this series.
You know what's like, okay, this is like me fangirling and like geeking out a little. But in terms of the connection between Fire Force and Soul Eater, I remember like within our fandom, us speculating like, this is within the same universe. Like there are certain things where it's like, this is within the same universe. We were like, no, it's not, blah, blah, blah. And then it was confirmed that yes, it was. We weren't crazy. But what I find super interesting is that like Soul Eater, as the name would allude, is really about killing and the taking of souls. And so in like the intentionality behind Fire Force being a complete opposite in terms of having a high regard for life and valuing life. So again, we're going back to these infernos, these people who undergo, you know, spontaneous human combustion, and they blow up in flames. And the Fire Force, like they're tasked with putting their souls to rest. And there's a ritual that they do, and there's a prayer that they say as they extinguish the flames. And just seeing the contrast between Soul Eater and what it represents in terms of death, and Fire Force and the intention behind highlighting life, I just think it's so beautiful. I think that's something people don't talk about often, but that's like another connection I really have with this series, is just the high regard for life and the rituals behind putting souls to rest. I really, really love.
I got chills when you were saying that, because I remember specifically, don't try to get me to know what episode it was, but there was this one scene where they like go to a house where it had happened, and they're like, I don't know if it's the main character, but Shinri or like somebody was reflecting and just kind of like looking, and then the way just the cinematography of that scene, like spending a long time looking at the table and where it happened, and like there's so much humanity there that always got to me, because I feel like too, when I saw Fire Force was at a time where, and you know this about me personally, people listening may not, I really believe that you get series in your life, like I know people be like, that's anime, whatever, but like things that you watch, you're watching it and it's meant for you to watch it at that time. And I feel like when I was introduced to Fire Force, a reason I really was drawn to it was because not too long before that, I had like a crisis kind of dealing with like thinking about death. And I think it's called like existential crisis, when you're like, what happens next? And like this show really provided a lot of comfort for me in the fact that like this horrific, like you said, this horrific thing is happening to people, and this is like their last moments, and they were turning basically like into something that they're completely not. And even to the end, like they're still like they feel so bad that they have to do this, but they're also like, I'm doing this and you need this. I'm doing this to save your life. And we're going to do it with care. We're going to do it with prayer. And everyone takes it so seriously. And that's something I feel like you don't really get, like, you know, like a lot of animes like killing and stuff, or not a lot of animes, but animes that have like killing and stuff is like the good guy, the bad guy. And this is a show, like you said, like the bad things are happening, but they're happening to regular people, and like that's out of their control. Makes me kind of sad.
Yep, no, you're talking about a season one. I think that's the second episode where we now have Shinra, the main character, and we have Arthur, who's another one of his comrades. It's like his little frenemy. And I think that's like one of their first missions. And yeah, it's just so beautifully like drawn and animated. And then Captain Obi, who's over the 8th company that they're members of, really explains to them like the process and the importance of it, and the fact that these were once humans and they still have like loved ones who care about them, and it's important that, you know, as Fire Force members, they take it seriously and they handle it, you know, in a delicate manner. And I'm just like, dang, that's beautiful.
It really is. And I think this is perfect because it's getting me to my next question, because when you hear about Fire Force, you don't hear about any of this. Like, I'm sorry, like no one is talking about this like deep and beautiful story and the caring and the preservation of lives, and everybody is fighting to stop this combustion from happening, like trying to find out why it's happening, because they don't want it to happen anymore. Like they want to eradicate this. And that leads me into the next thing that I wanted to get into is it could be this, but I know it could be something else, is what is something about Fire Force that people are getting wrong? Whether it's this you know, this plot point we're talking about, something else, or characters, you know, I feel like it's a very misinterpreted show.
It's something you said earlier, just like boobs and fire. And I think people think that fan service is the primary focus of Fire Force. And it's really frustrating for me. I was actually, this goes back to my journaling, right? As I'm watching, there's a character in particular where there's fan service around her, and it has to do with like her power ability and all that and whatever. I won't get too much into the reason why, but there's like a reason why there's a fan service, and it's really like silly, and it's really silly. Like it's meant as comedic relief, though I understand why people may have gripes about fan service. What bothers me in particular about the ways in which people talk about fan service in regards to Fire Force is that they just lie. So I was actually just tweeting about this the other day. People, like I've had people tell me, like on my TikTok videos, people have told me, I really wanted to give Fire Force a chance, but I couldn't make it past episode 1. There's just too much fan service. And the fact of the matter is, there's 0 fan service in episode 1. The character where there's a lot of fan service centered around, her name is Tamaki, is not introduced until episode 3. So like already, like you're lying. Like you're just mimicking what you've heard other people say online. Then people just say in general, like it's just such a detractor. There's just too much of it. So what I've been doing is rewatching, and I've been literally calculating the amount of screen time that Tamaki has, and figuring out the percentage of her screen time where there's fan service, and then seeing that percentage of fan service in relation to the runtime of the show. And when I tell you, listen, I have it in my notebook. When I tell you these people are lying, like literally in her first, like her introductory episode, which is episode 3 of season 1, she's on screen for 3 minutes. 3 minutes out of the 22 minutes. And in that entire time, the fan service equates to 25 seconds. 27 seconds. 27 seconds out of a 22-minute, 23-minute, 24-minute episode. There's another episode she's on screen for 55 seconds. There's 0 fan service. The following, like I've been doing the math. It's like right now, in terms of my calculations, I am on episode 7 with her. And the fan service, when you do it in relation to the full runtime of all 7 episodes, it's literally like 0.007%. So, like, I think it's fine. Like, I think people have the right to watch what they want to watch. Don't watch what they don't want to watch. If they don't want to watch it because of the fan service that's there, that's fine. But to, like, blatantly lie and say, like, it detracts from the story or they couldn't make it past episode 1, like, you guys are just lying. And that part is frustrating because that's all you ever hear about Fire Force. And it's just, like, not true. It's simply not true by the math.
It really isn't. And I'm like, listen, I'm somebody that I'm not like a fan service person. But there's that fast forward button, and a lot of devices now you can fast forward like exactly 10, 15 seconds. Like, I get it. It can, like, at first too, like when I first saw it, I was like, oh, this is different, because I hadn't watched anything like it. I was like, oh my, I even have a tweet. I'm like, well, that was interesting. And then it literally is just like, it happens so infrequently, and it's not like, I feel like people, like, I'm sorry, but people be acting like it's like this deep scene, like the universe is, everything's getting revealed, her boobs just pop. Like, that's not what happens. Like, it may be fan service, but it's also happening in a scene that she's actually in. Like, they be acting like she just arrives at the final battle, boobs blazing, and that's what happened. It's like, no, it is something that I think Fire Force, and there's other media. No, I don't think another anime in recent times has gotten it as bad as Fire Force, but I know like Demon Slayer gets a lot of like, oh, it's mid accusations. I just think people love egging something on.
Oh, yeah.
And Fire Force is an easy target, because if you are a Fire Force fan, like what we talked about a couple minutes ago, the show is really, really deep. And if you're not someone who's like, you know, a lot of people watch anime to catch up, be on trend, be in conversation. Fire Force, to get the plot, to understand where the story is going, you have to pay attention to, like, even like they be having the moments that be like, here's the background of what happened 10,000 years ago or whatever.
Yep.
And like, you need to pay attention to get what's happening. And a lot of people don't do that. So they're watching and they're not understanding, and they're just watching to be caught up or be part of the conversation. Of course, it's easy to feel like focus on the fan service when you're going in specifically looking for it. It's like when you have a red car in mind and you go outside and every single car you see is red. You are actively looking for those things. And I'm glad that you touched upon that, because I feel like people, I and this may be diving off into the deep end in my woo-woo bag, but people, especially with fan service, assign it to like morality. And if you enjoy something that has fan service, all of a sudden you're a bad person. You are like, you're pedo, like you're doing all this stuff. And it's like, you are not a moral high ground above me because you refuse to watch something for a couple seconds. And I'm not a bad person because I can look past the fan service. Doesn't mean I enjoy it, but I'm not like a bad person. But I think that's a lot of the issues with Fire Force. It's like a morality thing where people want to put you down because you like it.
You be spitting, Lisa. So like two things about that. Like one, I think right now in the anime space online, there's a lot of virtue signaling. Puritan culture is really popular, I think, especially with like Gen Z. So I've even witnessed that like with the types of comments that people put on like fan fiction and stuff. Like, you are the devil himself if you write about certain topics. If you know that, like, that's just like the reality of like the climate we're in online. So it's like a lot of virtue signaling, and you're right, they do assign morality to that. Another thing, and you know, people might burn me at the stake for this. Just make sure you paint the wood pink, okay? They might burn me at the stake for this, but I find it interesting, and I've said this before. I feel like Fire Force is like an equal opportunist in terms of fan service. And like, we see there's like a whole like segment about like the men's calendar or whatever. There's no women in that calendar whatsoever. It's all men, and they're all posing. Like, we see them at the hot tub and stuff, half naked. We see them working out half naked. No one ever says anything about that. And there are scenes where like Sheena is included, and he's a teenage boy, right? Mm-hmm. No one ever says anything about that. And I think it's interesting the ways in which people view women's bodies, and how they like overtly assign a lot of like sexual nature to it in ways that they don't do for men, even if it's like equal and shown in the same exact way. And I think that says like a lot more about them than what they're trying to say about others.
Motherfucking bars. I wish I had a soundboard so I could play that one sound I'm always referencing. Now that's what I call motherfucking bars. But it's just, woo, a word, because you know what, they do be having that male fan service, and I do like that male, that Captain Obi looking fine. But it and something me and Ari were talking about this weekend too. It's like fan service is everywhere, and whether you like, you know, it's funny, and this is something that like, I know it's the same people. we cannot lie and say that JJK Mappa wasn't given into the fan service this
Okay.
season. Like, they literally, I saw people doing panel comparisons. They was giving abs to characters that stomach was not showing. Like, they were, the way they was animating Toji, like, I think he's a deadbeat. And I was like, maybe some people have a point here. And then people will do the manga panel comparisons, and I'm like, oh, absolutely.
Yep.
There's definitely fan service. But it's just take it, and it's so funny until you said it. I'm like, you're right, because especially the way they was doing Gojo, there's this one scene. I'm like, nah, y'all had to do all that. When he's like breathing heavy, I'm like, Mappa, please. What is he doing that he need to be breathing like this? But it's just, I wish people would. I think that's one of the downsides of social media. It's so easy to rive away. Somebody tweets something with 2 big words, and you're like, and they absolutely do not have a point.
Never have a point.
You're just like, okay. But with that, being that, something about you that I love, and I'm similar, and I think more people should be like this. Is like the Fire Force, especially with Fire Force. The Fire Force fandom, they just be riding out for each other. They love each other. They're gonna support each other, posting things that they love, and they're happy about the show. But within the fandom, what is an unpopular opinion that you have about the show that maybe other Fire Force fans wouldn't agree with you on?
I haven't heard anyone speak about this, so I don't know if it's unpopular or not. But it is, in my personal opinion, that Fire Force has one of the greatest power systems in anime. It's very unique. I think it's very simple and to the point, and then it's like expanded upon within each character's unique abilities. So for those unfamiliar, Fire Force's power system is centered around fire and pyrokinetic abilities, and it's basically broken down into 3 different categories. You have your first generation, second generation, and third generation. So first generation are individuals who can spontaneously combust and turn into the infernals, and obviously they really don't have any control over their powers, and as a result they pose a threat to others, right? Your second generation are those who can manipulate existing flames, but they cannot create them on their own. And so they're able to use like flames around them in an environment, and they typically use them in combat. And then you have your third generation, which are those who are most advanced users, and they can produce and control their own flames. And so obviously third generation users have the most versatility and strength in their abilities. It should be noted, and this is from the creator himself, that like if you have a battle between like a second generation and third generation, this does not necessarily mean that the third generation is stronger and definitely going to win. It's just about their ability to like ignite flames on their own and how they use them. And to take it one step further, there's this element known as the Adola Burst or the Adola Link. I don't want to give away spoilers or get like too deep into the myth, but essentially there's like this supernatural plane of existence known as Adola, and there is something known as the Adola Burst, which is like the original flame, the most powerful. There are individuals who possess the Adola Burst. Our main character, Shinra Kusakabe, is one of those, and as such he has something known as the Adola Link, so he can link to like that supernatural plane of existence, and he has really strong powers, right? So obviously like those characters are known as pillars, like are stronger on paper, but we see these different generation of fire users manifest in different ways. And there's even a character, Captain Obi, our captain of Company 8, who doesn't have any powers whatsoever, but we still see him hold his own in battle, which I think is interesting. But I just really love the power system. And it's funny I'm talking about this now because I think people were arguing the other day about whether or not JJK is easy to understand or not. And I do think JJK's power system is a bit more complex. I feel that way about Hunter x Hunter as well. And I'm fans of both of those. They're both in my top 10. So that's no shade to them. But what I appreciate about Fire Force is that it's simplistic. And then we see each unique character utilize their powers in different ways.
I think that speaks volumes, again, on how good of a series it is. Because a lot of times, the more people think the more complicated the better or the stronger, and it really isn't like, it doesn't have to be like, it really does, like I should not be doing chemistry to figure out what's happening here. And I get it, like, you know, and people are like, how you watch a show, you don't know what's happening, and it's like, I just like, they just look cool. But then, you know, and the one thing you said about Fire Force, I forgot that the captain doesn't have any abilities, but he be doing it, and it's like the way that they come together as a team, and everybody fighting their own, everybody's using the strengths that they have and they don't have, and they're like looking out for each other with those abilities. And I also think something that stood out to me, you ever notice in certain shows, and not even just specific to anime and manga, like there'll be one character that's the strongest, and then it'll be like, all right, every single plan is the strongest person takes on every single thing that ever has to happen, and they have to be the martyr for every mission. Like, you go do the thing and we'll be back here. And it's like, Fire Force is really not like that, where, you know, everybody's doing something. Yep. And it's like you would think, like, there's a certain point where I'm like, y'all could be using this, and it's like, wait a minute, he's not honed in yet, he's still got a work to do. This person clearly is stronger, clearly can handle whatever is better, even if he can't produce his own fire. And I really love that, because the company, that's what was one of my favorite parts about it. Especially, now this is my unpopular opinion about Fire Force.
Okay.
Arthur's my boo. I love him.
No, I love
like
Arthur.
Romantic. No, because he got a lot of like slander because he's a weirdo, but he's so cute as a weirdo. Like, he just, I love how he is.
Arthur connects to, you know, I'm very woo-woo and delusional. And I think he is the poster child for being absolutely delusional. And it just works so well. He has such a strong sense of self because of what's happening in his brain. And we don't see it yet in the anime. I'm hoping that this is animated really well in season 3. But we see it in the manga, how that really manifests. And like, to your point about like all the characters like doing their thing, like you really see this. And there's some times where like the captain's down bad or Shinra's down bad, and others have to step in and fight these really, really, really powerful antagonists, and they hold it down. And you see everyone put in the work, and I love that so much in Fire Force.
It really makes for it, because you get it to, like, you're just not like, all right, 5 seconds, Shinra's gonna come in and beat everybody up and the day is gonna be solved, and it's like, that's not how it works.
Right. And
it makes it entertaining, and it makes you want to keep watching it to find out, like, how are they gonna get out of this situation. In total, now we're getting to the end, when you think about Fire Force and the legacy, you know, the manga's done, the anime, you know, do you think it's going to be wrapped up in season 3, or do you think there's 2 more seasons out of it?
I feel like there could be 2 more seasons.
So when the anime is done, because you already know what's going to happen because of the manga, what do you think the legacy of Fire Force is, and like what it has done for anime?
So found family is one of my favorite tropes. And I think Fire Force does it in a really unique way. So I think about characters like our main character, Shinra, who's under the impression that he's lost both his mother and his brother. And he came up on this upbringing where people are calling him the devil. And it isn't until he gets with Captain Obi, you know, with Company 8, where he feels like he belongs. Like, I'll never forget, like, this is a scene, like, in the very first episode where he joins Company 8, and he has, like, something about Shinra is, like, he has this devilish grin, and what it is when he's, like, really tense and nervous and anxious, he smiles. And Captain Obi is like, what's with this smile in your picture on your resume? And so Shinra kind of explains what it is, and they have like a little conversation, and Captain Obi's like, it's cute. And Shinra's like internal monologue is like, cute, I think he meant creepy, because he's so used to hearing such negative things about himself. There are so many times throughout the anime and then like in the manga panels where I am just obsessed with the father figure that Obi is for Shinra. And this is not something new to anime, like we see this all the time. There's just something so different about the way in which it's done in anime. I think about my favorite character, Princess Ibana, who literally had no family. Her family, like, she was an orphan, and her family was the other sisters at the orphanage, and how she lost everything, and how through like I guess like her mini redemption arc, she finds like this extended family in Company 8. I think about, characters like Arthur, who for a while didn't have family, um, and just the way that these people all come together. We were talking about Vulcan, the engineer, earlier. Literally, like he lost his whole family, but the ways in which like found family is manifested in this story, I think is a tale as old as time, but will forever like resonate with people. And I think even someone like as an adult, I consider you like found family, right? Like, we're like this, right? Like we're like this. Like you guys are people I consider family. You guys are people I see in my life for the rest of my life. I see you in my kids' life, should I have them. And I just think that's like a through line that so many people for generations to come can continue to relate to. And that like it's never too late to find your family, and you can like try and try again. So like going back to Princess Hibana, who was an orphan, and then she found her family within the orphanage, and then that quite literally like went ablaze, and then she was kind of like off on the wayside, but then refound family. Like it's never too late, even at the end of the world, which this is Fire Force is about, like the end of the world, right? We're talking about the antagonist trying to bring about the second cataclysm, like. And so even in the end of the world, you have people. You're always going to find people. There's always someone for you.
That made me tear up. It's so beautiful. I love that. Oh my god. I feel like I obviously haven't gotten as far as you, but that was something definitely, especially like Shinra, like I told you, like somebody said that other people used to like bully and they don't understand. He was just nervous. Like it's not his fault his teeth looked like that. Like that was breaking my heart at the beginning. They were so mean to him.
Yeah, because like even when he lost his mother and brother, and they're trying to find a place for him, and it's like his grandmother, and she's like, "That's the devil. I'm not taking him." Like that is like your own grandmother. And like he just grew up hearing such negative talk about him to the point where he internalized it, and for a moment couldn't even like conceptualize the fact that like, oh, Captain Obi and like Company 8 doesn't see me this way. They don't see me as the devil. Like this is my family. I just think it's beautiful. And like I said, it's not new to anime, but just the way it's done in Fire Force, especially with characters who quite literally don't have anybody, I think is beautiful.
It is, and that's such a good note to end this. I'm like touched. I did want to know before we close out, is I like obviously you're the Fire Force expert in my eyes. Are there any fun facts that you know about the series, about any of the characters that we would be surprised to know, or that you just want to tell us about?
I feel like I touched on some earlier when I was talking about the intention behind Fire Force, being a series about life. Another one that I feel like it's public knowledge, like it's within like the actual character cards, but people may not know. I say this often, like, oh, I'm really Princess Hibana in real life, but something about Princess Hibana is like she's a researcher, and obviously you guys know I'm a researcher, but like one of her actual hobbies, like on her character card, is also gaming. And so when I'm like, yeah, I'm a researcher and a gamer, like I'm Princess Hibana in real life, that's what I'm referring to. Like that's an actual fact. It's canon. It's not something I made up in my delusional brain.
And if you did, who gonna check you?
Who's gonna
Not
check
gonna
me?
be. No, but I it's funny because you say like it's on the character cards, but I think too something that, and this isn't just specific to Fire Force, but like because we've been reading manga for years, is like there's so much information about characters in manga that they'll put like a little like card or a little thing that like often doesn't get translated to the anime. And a lot of people go from watching the anime will leave off somewhere, and they rush to dive into the manga, and they're just trying to see what's happening, what's caught up, so they miss all those details.
Yes.
And they'll be like, you didn't know this, it was in the manga, but they read the manga, but they're just trying to get to the story. And I'm like, and especially like they'll be putting their birth time, their sign, their blood type, and those all have meanings too. Like that's not just in there for fun. But I love that you brought that up, because that made me think of that. Like it's there, but a lot of people don't know because they're trying to get to the story. They're not taking the time to kind of look at all the little additional details that the authors have left there for us.
Or they pick up from a chapter where the anime left off, so they miss like all those initial volumes. That's why like, I was saying earlier how I was waiting for it to build up in like physical copies. But that's one of the reasons I really love and cherish physical copies. I mean, you guys can like see behind me, right? Like I have a bookcase and I have a ton of manga and stuff down there. I'm really big on having physical copies, and you just don't get those gems. Even if you're reading like online translations and stuff, you don't get those things. Like they don't add those pages in.
They don't, and a lot of times, I like now because a lot of manga like manhwa is being produced for online that then the volume comes later and they add those special pages specifically for the print, so they don't exist elsewhere.
Yep.
Kiy, I can't imagine. I can't begin. I mean, I spent this whole episode showering you with love, but I can't begin to thank you for coming on and talking about Fire Force, because even me, someone who has only seen the first season, this has been so enjoyable. And like I said, I didn't dislike Fire Force. I actually really liked it. But some of the information that you dropped, I'm like, I need to go back and revisit this because this was a lot like of things that I didn't even. And I pride myself as, you know, I'm different. I'm not one of those girls. No, I'm just kidding. But I do feel like I pay attention, and I'm like, maybe I wasn't watching the same show because I missed. I mean, it has been a couple of years. But I just want to thank you so much for sharing all of your Fire Force knowledge with us. And really, I want to just hone in if there's a big takeaway from this, and my takeaway for listeners is, it really does not matter what anyone else has to say about your fave. And I hope that if you like an anime, if you like a manga that is the most hated, or people, you know, got their opinions, like, don't let that dissuade you from talking about it and putting it on and sharing the love. Like, you mentioned that thread about the fan service, and, you know, I was going through it as a bestie to make sure people weren't getting out of pocket. I will say that. But there were people that were like, oh wow, I really didn't know this, like I'm gonna check it out now, like, and people that they weren't being sarcastic, like they weren't trying to be like funny, like they were like, oh, maybe it's not as bad as I thought that it was. And you know, when you don't talk about Fire Force to recruit other people, but the fact that you're able to change so many people's minds because they see you know, you're a PhD student, and this is a series that has a lot of like quote unquote controversy, but if someone like you who's a researcher identifies with the show, is finding all this science information, I think that's a beacon for other people to be like, and not just with Fire Force, but to dig deep outside of the social media conversation, because the social media conversation is never going to be the actual story. And what does it cost you if you like something, if you're interested, to just forget what people are saying online and still give it a chance? Like, it's sad to me that people are letting conversations on social media stop them. Even from, Fire Force don't got to be your fave, but the fact that you won't even press play on an episode because you're like too worried about what the timeline is saying, I think that's a lesson to everybody. Like, if you want to give something a try, just try it, because there's going to be so much that the timeline is never going to talk about.
Yep. That reminds me of your first episode with Ari. And Ari mentioned, if you haven't watched the episode yet, what are you doing? Go watch, listen, whatever you want to do. But Ari was talking about coming up during a time where, like, you were just watching whatever you had access to, whatever piqued your interest, whatever. For me, a lot of times it's like the visuals and how colorful it was. And you didn't have that person in your ear going on and on and on. What's like the little meme, the little joke? So such and such is so good, when you have a person in your ear telling you it's not. And that's literally how I feel. Like, just literally, like, give things a try. Don't listen to the timeline, and don't like go to the timeline like, what should I watch next? Like, if something is of interest to you, it does not hurt you to give it a try. You don't need anyone on Twitter to tell you yes or no.
No. And the last thing I'll say is, you will surprise yourself by giving things a try, because like I said, I am somebody that like fan service would turn me off, and I really enjoyed this show, and I'm glad that when I watched it, I hadn't seen that. Not that I'm like swayed by social media opinions, but if you know, a lot of times, especially with anime, it's like any media, trailers, clips that you're gonna see are never gonna be the real meat of the show, because they don't want to give the show away. They want you to watch the show. And there's I think of when I discovered JJK, all the media surrounding it was so scary. And Kiy knows I'm a punk. I hate scary stuff. Like, ooh, no. And then I watched it, and I was like, thank God I didn't go by the trailers, and I just formed my own opinion, because I love this. It's not scary. But it's like, you have to get past that and
Yeah.
just watch things for you. But I'm just so glad. I'm gonna wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Kiy, for coming on, schooling us about Fire Force. Of course, I'm gonna have all your links in the description of the episode. But let us know where do you want us to go and find you? Where can we get more of you and more of this?
You can find me on my website, which is www.pinkiysensei.com. I'll be sharing like a lot about my research there. If you're interested in the research I'm currently conducting, there's a spot on my website where I have some abstracts there and keywords. And I'll be posting final publications and stuff as they get published. We're speaking that into existence this year. My handle is PinKIY Sensei across all social media platforms. Definitely check me out on YouTube. I actually have a video deep diving into Princess Hibana, and I'm connecting it to like media theory and that sort of thing. So I'm coming from a media analysis lens in that video. So go check that out. Also PinKIY Sensei.
Just look it up. She everywhere. All the stuff is good. And I'm not saying that as a biased person, but definitely I am biased. But thank you everyone so much for listening. As always, if you enjoy this episode, please be sure to share it all across social media. Go to Walmart, put it on the board. I'm gonna revive that Walmart bulletin board. I keep mentioning it, but let's get more information on there. I'm sure somebody's looking. They could find the podcast there. But thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you all on my next episode.